Alright, I'm going to show you guys how to use these three rigs that I've provided. The names are Goon, MooM, and Beefy, and this is Beefy. And this is for our future assignment where we're going to use these guys first to make some poses and then to do a walk cycle. So first, let's just take a look at what we've got on screen. We've got this grayish beige kind of guy with all these kind of segmented body parts. He had some weird things going on where his geometry was backwards.
You're giving us a rig this time instead of having to make our own.
Oh, we're doing that too. We're going to do this first, and then we're going to make it.
Yeah, that's actually that's nice.
Yeah.
To have us do this first before having to make our own.
Did we not do this first last time? I thought we did. I mean, you're probably right, but I don't remember. Okay. So let's look at what's going to happen every time you open a rig is you're going to see all of these little control surfaces. And some of them are going to be the same for every rig. So for instance, at the bottom near the feet, there's almost always going to be a universal placement curve. You typically don't animate this one. Sometimes it's got scale. This one has a locked Y scale of 1, which probably, oh, it does do something. Okay. So it's just 1 so that it's always uniform and never skews. This is usually the only safe way to scale the character is if they provide a scale interface like this. Otherwise, you never want to scale anything on a rig. You can move it and rotate it, that's it. Try never to scale unless there's a special channel. So this one down here, we almost always have, followed by the second most important controller, which is either center of gravity or root. In this case, they're calling it root, so it could be cog. This is the one where if the character is moving through space, backflipping and jumping, it's the primary way of making them do things. So always use this one, usually centered around the hips or the waist. Slightly smaller than that is sort of like a hula control. It's meant just for the hips. In the case of this rig, we can translate it with squash and stretch, which is really fun. That's not always a feature, but sometimes it is, and it makes for some really cool kind of deformation. But rotating is typically a part of it, and it's just a way to offset the hip position when you're walking or dancing or something like that. You don't always have to use it, but the big benefit is that if you tried to do like the hula with this one, you'd have to counter rotate all of the spine pieces so that the top body was kept under control, and that would be very, very obnoxious to do. So instead, if you want to do small adjustments, this one's independent of the upper body and makes it a lot easier to keep control over separate parts. So just keep that in mind. Moving up the torso, these on the back are your forward kinematic spine controls. All that means is that these work like typical bones from the bottom to the top, so that if I rotate them all together, the whole spine rotates or twists. This will be the kind of spine that we build, and it's the most basic kind of spine that you can have. It's pretty easy to understand, and if you control all of them at the same time, you typically get a better result than if you try to pose them one at a time. One at a time starts to feel kind of broken in motion and as if they've got like individual vertebrae controls. So I recommend just grabbing the group of them all at once. This guy actually has a IK chest also, which is, again, you can move it. So I could move this one, and I could move this one, and together they can place the various parts of the spine. The only thing I saw was that if you rotate the top, it doesn't really bend the back at all. It's sort of just a squash and stretch placer. So you almost certainly have to use the FK spine, but you don't really have to use the hips or the chest control to get good animation. It's probably a good idea, but you don't have to. So either use all of them together or just use the FK spine on this guy. Continuing upward, we do have shoulder controls. The shoulders are based on rotation. The ball that is the shoulder kind of comes out of the skin. My advice to you guys is just ignore that. I think that's just poor skin paint weights. If you need to shrug the shoulders, just go ahead and lift it all the way up to where this ball is completely exposed and just pretend like that's not happening and it's skin. Treat it more like a silhouette instead. But it does look kind of odd when you do that. The neck doesn't really seem very different from the head, but the neck rotates from lower down, so make sure you're using both neck and head. and then head all the way up here. There we go. We've also got a head orient. I've changed all of the orient controls to represent what I think would make the most sense. Right now, if I bend the spine forward, just real quick, there we go. You can see the head faces the ground, but on the head control, if I change this orient to 0, the head follows its own orientation, which is kind of nice if you've got like skateboarding or biking or doing a lot of really dynamic things in which the character is supposed to look somewhere in particular. So now the head's following its own orientation. It can be really helpful. It can be annoying or look artificial, but you can turn it on or off. It's on by default so that it follows the body. And if you want to turn it off, then that makes sense. It will kind of help you to orient the head better. So I'm going to just zero out the controls. One of the big things about all animation rigs is that it's good to zero out your controls when you build it so that if you deform things and move them around, it's really easy to reset just by entering zeros back into all these fields. And in some cases you can do this and enter in zeros and everything will reset, and that's really nice. Okay. So that's it for the head. There's no face on this one, which is fine. I might have put on like a nose or something like that just to show the direction of the look, but I think he's pretty good with kind of the ridge around his face mask area. Let's go ahead and take a look at the arms. I've turned on the arms IK controls, but just so that you know, this little arrow back here is a switch. So if you wanted to bend the arms like a doll, then you could, but I don't recommend that. I think that's a really annoying way to animate most of the time, and also impossible if you're going to climb a ladder or do push-ups or something. But it is possible if the arms are just dangling free like they usually are. What we've got right now is IK controls, inverse kinematic, which means you place this mitten and the arm tries to follow the position as best it can. The weird thing about IK controls, if you've never used them before, is what happens with the elbow. The elbow is typically controlled by a little locator like this one. So here's the IK elbow control. Wherever I put this, the elbow tries to aim, but it's not a literal position where it's going to go right to this spot. It's just going to try to aim in that direction. So sometimes it doesn't quite match up. Sometimes it's a little bit different, but it's sort of a general thing. And you can see for some reason it's aiming itself repeatedly, which is kind of odd. We can move and rotate the hand, okay, however you want. Again, don't scale it. If I move this beyond the limits of the arm, then it just stops wherever its limit is. But we do have a stretch control here. So if I turn that to 1, now what happens is if you overrun the limits of the arm, it stretches and squashes. I like that a lot, and I think that it's good for certain exaggerated actions. The only danger is in elbow popping. If you go from a position that's bent to one that's hyperextended too quickly, it can look really artificial. But that could be a good feature to turn on. We also have elbow lock, which is going to be really weird. That literally treats the IK controller as if the elbow has to be in that position. The way I'm using it right now is completely broken and stupid. So be aware that what this is mostly for is if you wanted the character to keep their elbow like on a tabletop or something, then it would allow you to define a position. But very, very quickly, it can look pretty bad if you're stretching the arm also. So what I might do is turn off the stretch and then see, well, okay, you can't turn off the stretch if you have elbow lock. So apparently you need stretch for elbow lock to function. But you can see how odd it looks like that. It can be used correctly, but it's very, very difficult, and you have to be subtle with it. So I would leave elbow lock off and stretch on, personally. Just as a demonstration, I can grab this, and I can enter in zeros, and the arm goes right back into position, which is really nice. We also have, let me take a look in the mitten real quick before I talk about fingers, but we also have, let's see, other various locks that we can have for the hand. So all of these, hips, chest, and head, are locks, so that when you turn them on, the hand will stick to that body part. So let's try stick to the head, and then I'll put it over on the head somehow. We'll go way up here, Probably got to orient the elbow better. Okay, something like that. So now what should happen is if I move the head, the hand is attached to it. So sometimes that can be helpful if you need to perform an action like that. The weird thing may be that if I turn this off, actually this rig left it in place. Maybe that wouldn't always happen, but sometimes it pops to a new location. This should also be true if I move the chest, because the head is being moved by the chest, and also if I move the root. So now it's kind of stuck to the head, which is kind of cool. So it's a nice feature. And you can do that apparently with this rig with the hips or the chest, which is cool. But that's not a standard feature. That's kind of a fancy feature. All right, let's look at the fingers actually really quick. Okay, so that's just an IK-FK switch. I might have put that in the mitten personally, but that's okay. We've also got this one. This is the palm, which looks like it doesn't move the... Wow, okay. Well, I guess for the whole hand, you've got this. And then you've got palm independent of thumb. That's a little odd to me. I'm not sure why that's really included, but maybe it could be helpful. And then we've got finger controls, so we can move each joint. And it looks like they have scale included. So I guess it's possible that we could scale these fingers. Let's just try. So the one pointing down the finger is X. Yeah, it looks like scale is allowed with this one. That's kind of great. That can be somewhat hard to manage sometimes, but it's nice to see that we have that capability. And then we've got this, which is just sort of the rest of the mitten. There we go. With fingers, it can be better to independently control the joints, although making it into a fist or into a point like that, that's completely fine. But sometimes it's better to treat the base different than the outlying fingers. For instance, if you're pressing onto like a tabletop, I want this to go down and this to go up to create like a sensation of pressure like that. And the same thing might be true of the pointer finger. I want this to go up, this to go over, sorry, this to go down, and that to go up like that. So now it's like I'm pressing onto a tabletop. And the thumb, same thing. Note the orientation of the thumb for later on when we make our own rigs. It's sort of this 45-degree angle down rather than straight up and down like this. So this is the better way to build it. It doesn't just go straight out to the rest of the fingers. It doesn't go just straight down to the palm. It does go out at an angle naturally. So that's more correct. And we've got each one of the joints for that. So simple but effective controls for the hand that are pretty satisfying. Let's take a look at the feet and legs. So the feet, let me frame, there we go. The feet are controlled by this kind of boot thing, this footprint, where we can place the foot wherever we want. I have turned on the tracking for the knee in this case, which is mainly because when you do this in a walk or a run, you kind of want the knee to stay ahead of the foot somewhat. And so if I take this, place it out here, and now start moving, the knee's never going to really break or look wrong, which I find to be a lot simpler. And if I rotate the foot, the knee stays in line with the leg, which is anatomically correct for the most part. So that's going to just make it a lot easier. Let's take a look at the different channels. We've got knee lock, which means go directly to this position. So I'm going to leave that off. It's the same as the elbow. Foot tilt, left and right, which can be nice. I've noticed at the most extreme, the toe starts to act weird on these, so be a little bit sparing if you use them. Heel to ball, there we go, and there. When you go all the way up to toe in this one, it starts to kind of levitate off the ground, so just don't do that. Instead, I think we have toe up, down. No, we don't. Ball swivel. Okay, maybe it's this one. Okay. So for peeling the foot off the ground, we actually have this controller separate. So make a note of that, because for walking, what we have to do is first start to lift the foot off the ground, then get the toe off the ground while this one reduces. And then finally, in the most extreme, once we're gone, sometimes... Wow, okay, that's starting to go all over the place. But you get the idea. It's going to take more than one controller to properly peel this off the ground. Though for the heel, it seemed fine. Yeah, except a little bit of weird tone stuff happening there. Not sure what's going on. And then swivel was like crushing a cigarette, like right in the middle of the ball of the foot. And let me see what's the extra. Okay, it's just an IKFK switch. Again, if you change this, it's like controlling a doll's joints, which is fine, but usually completely inappropriate for walking, jumping, running. We need contact with the ground, so we usually leave it like this. All right. So those are all of the features of Beefy, and then I can take a look at some of the other ones. How you doing, Miguel?
Good.
I'm just running through...
It's not just me and Tabor.
Yay! I'm just running through each of the basic rigs that I've provided for future assignments. If you want me to take a look at Unity stuff after this, then I'm happy to. So this is Goon. I've been using Goon for a long time. He's a very old rig, but I like him because he's basic and he's got some really good face and hand controls. I was doing dialogue scenes with Goon. There's another one called Norman that's a little bit better. But because the facial stuff is so much fun and so interactive, he's a really pleasant one to use. So these are all just kind of like sliders. And then this one even has a scrunch. So you can not just move it, but also have it kind of pinch in the middle. So that's really fun. That's not really features that we care about, but it is cool. And I think on the lips, where is it? So on this one, this is jaw. They also provide lip curl controls for 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom. You can see how low resolution he is. He's so old. And that gives you a really strong ability to make facial expressions. I think if I ever made a rig, I'd probably use this system because it was so nice to be able to just kind of like slide things around. The only other way I've seen is similar to what's going on with the eyebrows, that there's these little points that you just grab and move around. And sometimes that's good, but I feel like they're usually too unlimited and a little unwieldy to use. We've also got general curl, in or out, and general curl in or out down here, as well as tongue in there. That's what that is. So I just think he's lots of fun, but we're not really using the facial rig with what we're doing, but I just like it. You can also move the teeth around in there. He's just so much fun to use. There we go. Close that down. Can I turn? I was like, what's this for? I thought maybe I could turn the controls off for the face. All right. So Goon, very much like Beefy, has got a general controller down here at the bottom. Goon has actually got size controls for every part of his body. I don't recommend messing with them for our assignments, but just know that they are really fun, and you can make certain characters that work just as well as the default rig works. Caricatured versions of body types, for instance, and that can be really great. Although the geometry doesn't look great, the result for the rig is pretty spot on. So at some point mess with that just because it's fun. This is the general placer. Again, not really meant to animate this. It's just in the scene to put him in the environment wherever you need to go. This is the root control. So the primary means of moving him through the environment right here. This one's got a squash and stretch control for his torso. I'm going to recommend not animating that just because it's a little bit much for our more basic use of this rig. He's got a hula control for his hips, just like Beefy did. Okay. And then he does not have a IK chest. You can see I can't move this. He's just got an FK chest. So just grab the 3 controllers all at once and rotate them all together. And you can't go too far wrong like that typically. It's going to give you a nice general rotation. I noticed that his head is orienting itself. Actually, it's his neck. I didn't notice that that was a feature that I had left on initially, but apparently it is. Let me check the neck. So yeah, chest influence here is turned off by default. That could be good because it keeps the head under control more, but if that is something you don't like, just slide that over to 1, and now the chest influence will orient the neck and therefore the head. So for some reason they put that on the neck instead of the skull. Actually, it looks like we could do it either way. So I could turn neck influence off, and now if the neck moves, the head doesn't reorient, and if I influence the neck, let's see what the head does. Okay, more like this now. So I guess either way, you could have either or. Once you're trying to animate it, get a little bit of experience doing that, you'll kind of get a preference. I think I would prefer neck influence on and maybe chest influence off, like it was on default, probably a better way. Anyway, we can orient the head, move it around, orient the neck. The head has actually got a couple of switches. We've got eye follow. What that will do is that the pupil controller over there will just stay relative to the head, which can be nice if he's not locking his eyes on something specific. If we turn that off, then when we move the head, the eyes track this controller for both eyes, or one controller for a single eye, like that. Always fun to do this. And the eyeball controls actually have dilation. And they also put the lids in here as well, which is kind of cool. I think that's a bit odd because it's so separate from the rest of the head. I think if I was doing facial expressions over here, I wouldn't want lid control over there, but maybe it makes sense somehow. There we go. All right, shoulders. Just like on Beefy, these are rotation only. So just ignore the fact that the skin looks really weird and put the shoulder where you feel it needs to based on the ball. The arms are controlled via these diamonds. These are the IK controls if I move them around. They also have stretch. Don't worry about this separating. You're not responsible for the geometry. Okay, there we go. We can move that around. We've got the pull vector over here controlling the elbow. Actually, it's not, it looks like. Right now, the pull vector is not doing anything. Yeah, right now it's set to twist instead. So here we've got elbow twist, which will just reorient it in a direction. If you'd rather use the little diamond instead, switch this switch to 1. So now when I move this, the elbow will move. Sometimes people find pull vectors annoying, so they prefer twist. So just know that default is set to twist. Goon's hands are pretty cool. They're all in one single controller based on channels, which some people like, some people don't. Again, we've got chest influence, so we could stick it to the chest if we wanted to. Stretch, I think that's for the entire arm. I'd prefer to just not mess with that. That probably should have been in the diamond over here. But then we've got master grip, which is all the fingers minus the thumb at once. Master spread, which is how close the fingers are together or how tightly they're packed. Master cup, which I think is like grip, only it's the difference between pinky and pointer finger. And then thumb grip. So those are all the global controls, but in addition to those, we have joint controls for all of the fingers down here. What I often found is that I would use the master controls to get basically to a pose and then fine tune it with the rest, which I thought was a pretty good way to animate things, and generally it worked out pretty well. So you can still do all three there. You've also got individual spread and roll, which is not a part of the master controls, like that. And they've all got them. So pretty good hand controls. We're not going to do very much hand animation, but just so you know they're available. Down here we've got the IK controls for the feet. Just place them wherever we want. The knee is not locked, and I don't think it's lockable on this one. But right now I think it's not. Oh, it is. Okay, so the knees are obeying, but we could turn that off also, and then instead use twist if you wanted to. Personally, I like a pull vector for the legs, but I also like it locked to the ankle or hip so that it stays in line with the foot generally. This one just doesn't have that feature. Then finally down at the bottom, we've got, actually, what's this one? stretch, volumetric stretch, auto stretch. So those are just the stretch and IK. So just ignore this little bit. It's this diamond that we care about mostly. So we've got heel roll, ball roll, separate. Okay, we can even do this, like if you were cartoony Wile E. Coyote hanging off a cliff. Kind of cool. Toe roll, toe, rock, and pivot. The key for a lot of these channels is to use them together carefully, but not always at the same time. So if we were ball roll and then toe, right, now we've lost track of where the ground is. But if we do ball roll and then toe roll, we're still locked to the ground here on the toe, despite the fact that the ball is doing this. That one kind of makes sense. But if you add heel roll to this, we've lost complete track of the ground. We have no idea where the ground is anymore. So, I don't know, maybe this would be useful for like rolling your foot across the barrel or something, but I think there's probably a better solution. So be careful about using several of those channels at once. You often want to zero one channel out before using a different one. So I would zero toe roll out before using heel roll, for instance. All right. And there we go. Those are all of the controls for Goon. Any questions about that? Let's take a look at the last one. The third one is the weirdest one. And I included him because he's a good character. He works properly. By the way, there's errors that are popping up every time I'm opening these because they're old and had like mental ray nodes. Just close those. They don't mean anything. This guy's name is MooM, M-O-O-M. And
He looks weird.
he is weird, but he works just like the other two. And he's got some cool, squashy, stretchy facial stuff going on. His eyes, the weirdest part of him, I think, is that his eyes are concave. Right? His pupils are inside this pocket with like this lens on the outside, which makes it a little bit strange posing his eyes sometimes. I actually turned on his nose and ears, but you can turn them off. Also, he's got buck teeth typically, which I turn off because I think they're too goofy. But all of that is up in the face settings here. You can change them all on and off right up there. His controllers, these pink ones, they work just like any other controller. It's just that they're polygon geometry so that they've got this kind of solid presence. If you tried to hide geometry like polygons, they're going to go away too. So don't do that. Instead, you have to turn off the layers to get him all by himself to where you can watch his animation. This guy, my only gripe with that is that these would export with an FBX and probably render, which would be undesirable. And so that's why so often we use NURBS curves only. But they chose to do this, and it's fine. It's kind of convenient to grab, but it's a little bit odd. Yeah. So taking a look at the bottom, there's actually a whole bunch of settings down in this master controller down here. If your computer is having a tough time running this character, you can turn their geometry lower. And so that will help with updating. You could turn it all the way to low. And then we could turn these to low. These are his hands. And then that means that this will run very, very quickly. But I prefer to leave it on high rather than highest, just because it's a nice smooth rig and really my computer can handle it just fine. Okay. So that's down here. We've also got visibility controllers for all of the different body parts, so you can turn some off if you want. Face is probably the one that you should turn off. Extra I already have off because it was just the squash and stretch in the head. And there's one extra that I turned off that would be relevant to your interest. The deformation controls are all of these little bits all throughout the body. What they do is pretty great. They allow you to make noodle arms like that. So yeah, that's not really common, but there's a use for that. You can do noodle fingers too. So I kind of recommend that you just leave those off and don't mess with them for our purposes, but just know that that's a pretty cool feature and an appreciated one, but we're not really going to need to use that. Okay. All right. Is that it for, besides a scale, there is a global scale control for MooM as well. One of the safest ways to scale the character like that. Now in game development, we can actually just animate them at a scale of 1 and scale them once they're brought into Unity. So just know that that's even safer, but don't scale anything on an animation rig unless there's a provided interface like that. All right, let's take a look at all of the basic controls one more time. So here is the center of gravity or root control. They call it body key in this case. Okay. Then we've also got this squash and stretch hips controller, which gives a really nice, satisfying result. In the case of MooM, I think you can ignore all the FK controls and just use the IK if you want to, because there is a nice kind of bend to the body. But if you want to work more traditionally, then just use this one, and then I think you have to include this third one in order to get proper bending. Yeah. So you can treat it either way. Got a neck control, kind of hard to spot, but there it is. And the head control, which is easy to spot, and I always found very distracting personally. There we go. There are some channels in here that I'm not sure what they do. Left rotate X. Oh my god, it's the ears. Wow. Okay, you can flap his ears. Jeez. I never knew. Now I know. Okay. So, basic head control, and you got ear flapping too. The shoulders are actually translates rather than rotates like the other ones were. Just pull them upward to shrug, downward to move, as if you're kind of using the shoulder like a joystick. It works just as well. It's just a little odd, and it's not bounded, so be careful. Right? Hand. There we go. Squash and stretch as well. Pull vector for the arm, just like we had before. And do we have an option? This time it looks like we don't have an option to turn that off. We do still have elbow lock though. Here's the hand controller, or the finger controller rather. We've got curl. Wow, that actually moves way faster than I thought it would. Curl, master scrunch, master relax, cone, which is like picking up a small object, spread, and then spread controls for each finger. I'm not crazy about these controls, but they do work similarly because we do have individual finger controls right here. So this one can curl, scrunch, spread, twist, and then we've got individual joints, including this one, which is like the metacarpal, or yeah, whatever bone this is that goes through the wrist. These are phalanges. That's the carpal tunnel. I think this is the metacarpal. So bend A is like the metacarpal. I think it looks good if you were like typing or playing the piano. Other than that, I don't know if I would ever use that. But here's B, C, and D, which are the typical 3 joints that you think of when you think of finger joints. And then they've got lean and length. Okay. So those are pretty good. Down in the foot, we have these L and R and these footprints. The footprint is the main control. The L and R are for settings. So you can change the arm IK and leg IK to FK if you want. Just leave them be, I think. And then here is the control for the feet, where we can place and rotate. The pull vector for the knee should be functioning. Yep, there we go. Let me just check real quick. Okay, so it's not locked to the foot. Then we have heel toe. Also, yeah, MooM doesn't bound anything, so you can just flip and flip and flip and flip. So be very gentle with this control. Ball. Same thing here. Wee, wee, wee. And then toe twist. Toe FK, which is the wiggling like that, which you do sometimes use. I use that in midair typically when the foot is trailing behind after having taken a step. Kind of like this. Then I use toe controls to give a little bit of overlap typically, or a little bit of anticipation like this when it's coming into place down on the ground. Like that will oftentimes toe up a little bit to kind of overlap that and give a little floppiness to the foot. All right. So there we go. All the controls for MooM as well. So you've got any one of those 3 that you can use. What we're going to do is pose them with action and emotion, And then we're also going to do a walk cycle animation with them. And then we'll move on to creating 3D rigs. Okay? Any questions about him? I didn't go over the eyes, actually, or the facial stuff, but don't worry about the facial stuff. Just play with that. But the eyes are right here, and they're pretty weird. All right. Any questions about MooM? Or any of these 3D rigs?
Any idea why his eyes are green?
Nope. They just always have been. Cartoon reasons? I don't know.
I feel like there's a big part of what makes him look weird.
The greenness? I mean, we could change it. If we go into rendering hypershade.
Yeah, let's try this out.
See if it makes him look even slightly normal. I don't think it will, but... Oh, it's got incandescence, too. There we go. Ooh, maybe it needed its incandescence. Did that help?
That's better to me.
Yeah? I still feel like it's got goggles embedded in his head. I think maybe the lens... Yeah, there's a glass shader, too. Wow, how weird.
But isn't that how it's supposed to be? It's glossy.
I just make him blind. There. Yeah, it's so weird to me. I don't think I like it very much.
Yeah, the motivation, right, is like that's how eyes really are. It's just that because of the way our, not sclera, but yeah, sclera, right?
I don't think this is how eyes really are.
Yeah, they're concave, but the light is bent by the sclera, so it looks like they're out, right?
Well, sort of, but it comes all the way out to like here, though. It's like a little flat plane.
Right, it's still outside, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like scooped into your skull. These are like backwards eyes. They're like goggle eyes. I don't know. It's pretty odd. I've seen him in 11-second club competitions with dialogue, delivering it in a convincing way. Like you kind of get used to the weirdness pretty quick, but he's definitely pretty oddball. He's great for broad physical actions, though, especially cartoony stuff. Yeah, you know what? Turning that green off, I got used to that pretty quick, too. I kind of like it more now.
Yeah, it warms you up to him, huh?
Yeah. I've never really used him for anything super complicated, but I've seen him used for years successfully, so I know he's a reliable rig. Cool. All right. Any questions, you guys, about this stuff or about our assignment for the week?
Did you detail the difference between IK and FK?
I just kind of mentioned it on the first one that this is IK, as in move the end point and the middle figures out where it needs to be, and that FK would be moving it like a doll. So let me switch the leg. So we're posing an action figure now, one joint at a time. For the purposes of animation, that's all you kind of have to know. For the purposes of rigging, it gets more involved technically.
Oh, is the F forward?
Yes. Forward from the hip to the tip. I inverse from the tip to the root.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, forward and inverse kinematic. IKFK. And he actually has an IK chest, if you wanted it, plus squash and stretch.
I'm usually not into the cartoony stuff, but I love the squash on his stomach when you...
Yeah. I think even just a little bit of that is pleasing. It doesn't even matter if you're trying to go for something cartoony. Having it just be a little bit pliable is preferable, I think.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
Yeah. Sometimes rigs have like breathing controls where they'll like inflate the chest for you. This one doesn't appear to have one.
Wow, that's kind of crazy, actually.
Well, it makes sense though. Like, think about a character who's about to shout really loud and they breathe in their anticipation pose. I would want their chest to inflate a bit, even if they were fairly realistic. So yeah, I kind of get why sometimes people provide a control for that. It's not really common though. Usually you just handle it with sort of body language of leaning back. But yeah, a number of rigs I've seen include that. Kind of funny to think that that is such a common feature of animals and humans, something that we don't think about at all when we're, posing characters.
That's true. It shouldn't have sounded weird to me, but it did.
Yeah, yeah. Like, why would you do that? Or even just like belly inflation, because you can even breathe in different ways. You can breathe from your diaphragm or you can breathe from your chest. And that's a very flexible, very gooey part of the body. I mean, I can put my hand on it and move it around. So the fact that there isn't a control for that should be the exception and not the rule, you know? But it's not. It can get gross really quick, though. If you have too much jiggling body parts, like jowls and whatnot, it's really distracting. It's not very cartoony. All right. Do you guys want me to look at the animation controller in Unity at all, or do you guys have a handle on that?
I haven't even checked out the video yet.
Boo. Boo. Boo, students, boo.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Hang on. Where's his face panel? 1 second. I got a thing for this.
Oh no, you're gonna make him look disapproving at us?
I'm gonna make him look angry, yeah. There. No, wait. He needs some... What are these? Corner of the mouths? Oh my god, that's not corner. That's like sucking in and out. Wow. Is it this? There we go. And then the jaw? Look at his really extreme underbite. I'm not a fan of that. You can't move it out either. Or maybe is this the
Pull
jaw?
it down, does it?
Ooh, wow. If I pull it down? Whoa. Okay. I really wish that's not how his mouth... Oh, look here. There, I can make it forward. Okay, that's too far forward.
It doesn't really look like it's meant to do it.
I think 0.5 is like... Oh, that's so weird. It's going like a straight line, straight back. I don't like it. I don't like it. That is the lip control. Okay, so these are... Oh, okay, that's a wide or thin mouth position controller. So I'm gonna zero those. Can I zero them all out? And then just use this one. That's like E or ooh. Oh, okay. So it's like phoneme. So this is like the speech controller, but it's really, really tiny. But it's the one that would help you make basic mouth positions. So that's a good feature. It's just implemented really strange on this character. Now he's incredulous.
A little off to the side gives him that kind of like, I forget the guy's name from Up.
Oh, Carl Fredricksen?
Yeah.
The old man?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
It's kind of like a Clint Eastwood, like, scowl.
And I've also moved his jaw pretty far forward at this point. So. All right, anyway. Anything else you guys want me to look at or cover then? If not, that's it for today. Nope.
I don't know, you got anything under?
I've got nothing.
All right.
Same.
We'll stop the recording there then, because that'll just serve as our primer for next week's assignment.